Hello anime and manga fans, I'm Kyle Glockner and welcome back to another episode of Animanga. With the conclusion of the summer season of anime, the Persona 5 animation has ended and it was something. I was really hoping that it would live up to the standards set by the Persona 4 anime, but it really fell flat. However, today we're here to talk about a good Persona adaptation. That's right, today I'll be talking about the Persona 3 movies. Now for this review, I'll be breaking down all 4 of the Persona movies on an individual basis and talking about each of them. I'll say now that there are spoilers ahead, so if you haven't played Persona 3 yet, please go do it. It's well worth your time. But if you're okay with spoilers, let's start with the first movie, Spring of Birth. Spring of Birth starts out exactly how you would expect, with our protagonist, Makoto Yuki, making his way to the C's dorm during the very first dark hour. Very quickly into this movie, we learn just how cold of a person Makoto is in this adaptation. He doesn't really care much for the other members of the dorm and isn't afraid to show it. I think this personality on a Persona protagonist is really interesting as a twist for the series. As we see in the animation of Personas 4 and 5, Yu and Ren are friendly and happily socialize with the other characters in the story, but Makoto doesn't seem to want anything to do with them. But after the movie takes off after the intro, the next thing I noticed was just how beautiful this movie looked. Persona 3 hasn't really seen the light since 2009, and even then that was just portable, which took away all 3D environments except for Tartarus. Seeing all these characters in crisp animation was amazing, and I would recommend the films on that basis alone. And that's pretty much it as far as the first movie goes. While it sounds like there isn't a lot there, this movie established what this tetralogy is going to do and how they're going to present the events of Persona 3. And in my opinion, that's all this first movie really needed to do. But after the first movie ends with the June full moon, we start with the second movie, Midsummer Night's Dream. The second Persona 3 movie begins in a very familiar scene during the July full moon, and boy does this movie just drop you right in, which isn't a bad thing at all. See, the Persona 3 movies do a great job of assuming you know the source material, yet present it in a slightly new way to make it feel fresh again. Now here's where that spoiler warning really comes into effect, so once again, if you don't want spoilers, stop watching now, because they're coming. There's a lot to unpack with this movie, but I'll start with one of the most important events, the introduction of Aigis. Anyone who's played Persona 3 knows that Aigis is a pretty important character, even when compared to the rest of the party. But in these movies, I would go as far to say that Aigis is almost a second main character. Throughout the second movie, we see that Aigis is the one that starts to break Makoto out of his typical uncaring demeanor, and we actually see some emotion out of him for the first time. One of the more interesting parts of this adaptation is the introduction of Shinjiro and his relationship with Ken. In the movie, Shinjiro joins C's during the Chariot and Justice Shadow battle, rather than between the August and September full moons, and has a much better relationship with Ken overall. But one of the last things I'll talk about for this film is its conclusion with Shinjiro's death. When I first saw his death scene in the game, it really didn't make me feel anything, if I'm being honest. It just kind of happened and that was it. But in the movie, I'll admit, I shed a few tears as he died in Akihiko's arms. I think that if the first Persona 3 movie didn't really hook you that well, the second one definitely will. But now, we'll move on to the third movie, Falling Down. Falling Down skips a bit of time from Shinjiro's death and starts us at the Strega confrontation and the Hanged Man Shadow fight on the Moonlight Bridge. The first thing about this movie that I found really interesting is the presence of Ryoji. In the game, Ryoji's a minorly important character at this point in the story and doesn't really have his moment until December. But in the movie, he plays an incredibly prominent role. Due to his outgoing personality, Ryoji is able to befriend Makoto, and a lot of the movie focuses on the friendship building between the two of them, much more so than in the game. This addition not only enhances the parts of the story we know from the game, but is perfect for developing Makoto's character throughout the film. Other than Aigis, we finally see someone really get through to him and crack into his shell, which leads to Makoto finally beginning to accept everyone in C's too. But the second part of this movie I want to talk about is the relationship between Chidori and Junpei. Unlike in the game, Chidori doesn't kidnap Junpei until November as opposed to September, and thus she isn't hospitalized for those 2 months. Now at first, this really put me off. I thought that by leaving out what I considered one of the most important character relationships within the game, these movies were setting themselves up to disappoint. But I was proven wrong, as the third movie makes up for lost time by very quickly and effectively establishing Chidori and Junpei's relationship, which all culminates to the tragic scene of her death, which, much like Shinjiro's, was way more impactful in the movie than in the game. Whereas Midsummer Night's Dream's telling of Persona 3 kind of pushed down some important events, Falling Down really brought us back on track, especially as we see the final scene, Ryoji's reveal on the Moonlight Bridge. This scene actually has a direct continuation from the end of Falling Down to the beginning of the final movie, Winter of Rebirth. Remember how I said that Ryoji's friendship with Makoto enhances a lot while also developing his character? Well, that all comes to a head in this scene as we see Makoto realize the truth of one of the first people he accepted as a friend. And I'll just say that this movie opens up with a bang, as Ryoji holds nothing back in his reveal as the messenger of Nyx. From this point, much of the movie focuses on C's as they find their reasons to fight, which adds a lot more that wasn't present in the game and overall adds a lot more depth behind each character's resolve. But finally, we get to the battle with Nyx and the end of Persona 3, and honestly, I don't have anything to say about the end of this movie other than if you're a fan of Persona 3, you have to see this movie. Makoto's solo battle with Nyx is probably my favorite scene across all 4 films, and while the final rooftop scene from the game had me a bit teary-eyed, the end of the movie brought me to full-on tears. This movie is an absolute masterpiece of an adaptation, and the 4th movie in particular is a perfect example on how to properly adapt source material without just replicating it in an animated form. Overall, if you've ever played Persona 3, you have to see these 4 movies. While we're all waiting patiently for Atlus to give us our HD re-release, these movies will whet your Persona 3 appetite. And if you're a fan of the Persona franchise and haven't played P3, go do that. Like immediately. The Persona 3 movies were animated by Anime International Company and A1 Pictures. Like I said, I really cannot recommend these movies enough, especially if you're a fan of Persona 3. But that's all the time I have for today, so let me know what you think by tweeting me at ZTVGoofingOff using the hashtag Animanga. Until then, I'm Kyle Glockner, and this has been Animanga.